At this time, we're going to do a roll call for the city council members, and then afterwards, Mr. Tabor, if you're there, you can do the roll call with Ms. Alexander and Planning Commission. At this time, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yeah, we just need to go join in. They've started. I see Miss Jackson in and her mic is active, but I do not hear her.
All right.
alternative name for Mr. Commissioner Irvin.
Mr. Taylor, did you get Miss Michelle? Is it Maroon?
Murals, yes, the secretary is Michelle Murals.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Okay, and I received a message that Commissioner Bland is telephone number 804-731-2522.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, no.
Mr. Mayor, I just don't want to leave everybody's mics open. You gotta have other people muted because there's a lot of other stuff going on in the background. You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
At this point in time, if everyone can turn down their devices, cell phones, TVs, things of that nature, you get a lot of background noise. And we have
I'm
Mr.
here,
Edwards in there,
Sam.
right? Okay, great.
This is Fenton Blaine. I'm here.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Tabor, I think that's everyone, and we're ready to get started. We're going to start off today with those planning commission items. Mr. Tabor, if you want to start off with your first item on the list, which was.
Can I make a quick request first? Can someone
Sure.
send me the list of the committee members? Because they have muted themselves again, and I'm gonna have to see if I can keep up with them.
If Ms. Boone is on, I'm gonna ask Ms. Boone to work with Mr. Tabor to get those names to you as soon as possible. So, Mr. Mayor, and I know Mr. Tabor is here. Reggie, you're gonna start on the planning commission items, please? Or which one do you want to start? The main, we have brought the group together for, if you can just take and lead us through that, and I'll jump in wherever possible.
Garrett, did you by chance receive the presentation document?
Oh yeah. Did you just send it?
It was earlier today.
Downloading it now. Which one's first?
It is 3706 South Crater Road.
Mr. Mayor, others while Garrett is pulling this up for edification for you, Mr. Tabor and I and our entire staff and water utilities team have been meeting with this developer here as a part of this process. One of you all need to keep in mind that they were scheduled to come asking for approval of this PUD. However, one of the things that we work with them, and they have decided that at this time, because of some capacity issues, that they will withdraw this at this time. However, we felt it's still necessary to bring you up to speed as it relates to this project, and also to highlight for both the Planning Commission and the City Council some of the challenges that we have in that area as it relates to capacity, as well as issues that we are going to have to address as it relates to our pump station based on some of our long-term development. Much of our capacity that we have today has already been slotted, mainly for the Impact Civica flow piece. We are doing some additional work. We also promised the developer and his group that we would be meeting with them still on every 30-day basis to figure out if there's a way that we could come back and assist them in any way. One option that we had for them was a phased opportunity, but we realized we couldn't guarantee them, so they are withdrawing their request, but it's still important for Mr. Tabor and the team to give you a presentation in that process. With that backdrop, Mr. Tabor, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Garrett, can we go to the next slide, please?
One second.
Thank you. Okay, so this slide includes information regarding the petition submitted by PG Investments LLC, contractual owners of 3706 South Crater Road, for the rezoning of the existing PUD M1C to PUD that would allow for a mixed-use development that includes single-family residential and residential townhomes, as well as general commercial B2. Currently, the property is vacant, and the proposal is for 330 single-family and residential townhouse developments, as well as a small commercial development. Next slide, please. Hi, Garrett, are you able to go to the next slide?
I'm on slide
Thank
3.
you.
Isn't that what you wanted?
Yes, yes, thank you. It just came up. So this illustrates a very rough draft of the schematic showing the proposed development. Can we go to the next? Slow in coming up. Is everyone else able to see the next slide?
Yes.
Not me?
I can
Okay,
see Reggie.
okay. So apparently I'm having problems, but so we'll continue to go through it. So this illustrates an aerial of the parcel. And then the next slide. This is a closer view of the parcel. Adjacent to it, you can see Addison Apartments, the Walmart to the north, the Regional Medical Center to the northeast, Old Mansion Foods to the south east, and South Plains neighborhood to the south. Next slide. This shows the current zoning, which is PUD, and PUD is also the zoning for the Walmart development and Addison Apartments. And to the south is the R1 neighborhood development. And across Crater Road, you can see the B2 and B1 development zones. Then the next slide shows the future land use plan, and indicated is mixed use for the parcel. Next slide. So the developers met with the city's development review team regarding their proposed development. Impact statements were requested from each member of the development review team. The developers requested a service availability letter regarding water and sewer service. The city's utilities division identified concerns with the utility capacity, and staff met with the developers and the city's engineering consultants regarding capacity concerns. Then the developer, as Mr. Lyons mentioned, submitted a request to withdraw the petition for rezoning. Next slide, please. So utilities impacts that were identified include revenue from both connection fees and for water and sewer. Then the property is within the Poor Creek sewer shed, and that's an important issue that we'll detail further. The pharmaceutical manufacturing development project that is currently underway will capitalize on most of the remaining Poor Creek pump station capacity, as well as the capacity of the downstream force main. The proposed development will have impacts on local infrastructure immediately serving the site, as well as within the greater context of the city's water and wastewater system. The city has not committed funding or studying improving the capacity or condition of the gravity sewer system upstream of the Poor Creek Interceptor, which is a concern. Next slide, please. So this illustrates This illustrates the Poor Creek sewer service area, the shaded area in the bottom right. Next slide, please. This further details the Poor Creek sewer service area and the elements that are part of that system. It includes 6.9 miles of gravity interceptor lines. Next slide, please.
They told us to unmute.
Okay, so back in 2006, there was a study provided by Draper Aiden Associates, and in that study, the Poor Creek sewage pump station was at that time at hydraulic capacity, according to city records. The 21-inch segment of the South Crater Road interceptor was at or near its hydraulic capacity, and the 24-inch segment of the Blackwater Creek interceptor was at or near its hydraulic capacity. Next slide, please. So also in that 2006 Draper Aiden report, they provided recommendations that are listed here, replacing a 21-inch segment of the interceptor, a 24-inch segment of the Blackwater Creek interceptor, replacement of the 36-inch segment of the Poor Creek interceptor, upgrading the Berkeley Manor pump station, upgrading the Prince George pump station, replacing existing 12-inch forced main, and upgrade of Poor Creek pump station. Next slide, please. So this slide speaks to the pharmaceutical manufacturing development. The city is committing to meet ongoing and future utility needs with the Flow Civica AMPAC Memorandum of Understanding. The Poor Creek Pump Station and force main improvements and relocation are calculated at almost $17 million. An additional $13 million in water infrastructure improvements is also expected, and $10 million in funding has been requested in the state budget for water system improvements, and that would go toward some of these anticipated expenses. Timmons has determined that meeting the future pharmaceutical development needs will utilize nearly all available capacity of the Poor Creek sewer service area. Next slide, please. So within the Poor Creek sewer service area, there is existing development, and current capacity meets the needs of the existing development. Brinko-Amstead Rail, the Route 460 business corridor, the Brassfield development with Sheets and Donuts, the South Crater Road business corridor, the medical center, Aqua Apartments, Addison Crater Apartments, and then the neighborhoods that are existing. Next slide, please. So this illustrates Poor Creek sewer service area development potential. In red are unimproved areas that are available for development. And we can see that there are significant numbers of parcels that are available for development. Then orange areas also provide or illustrate unimproved areas that would require rezoning. And the yellow illustrates undeveloped areas. Next slide, please. So potential development opportunities include the Brassfield Parkway, where the vacant property adjacent to the Sheets development, the new pharmaceutical hub, in addition to the pharmaceutical development at or near the AMPAC site. 800 acres of unimproved developable land already zoned residential, commercial, or industrial. 595 acres of unimproved developable land requiring rezoning, and 290 acres of unimproved property. Next slide, please. So finally, we wanted to provide some recommendations. One is a 5-year capital improvement plan and budget that includes Poor Creek system concerns. And we would also like to provide a more detailed presentation regarding Poor Creek and related issues. And then we would like to certainly identify and seek funding to address Poor Creek system needs. And that concludes this report. I wanted to mention that by code, the Planning Commission is to also review and develop a capital improvement plan and present it to the City Council. So the Planning Commission will be involved in the development process for the capital improvement.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, sir, one of the things I'd like to add is, as we are seeking the $10 million from the state, requesting for some of our infrastructure improvements, that is also designed to help us address some of the elements of Poor Creek. Mr. Tabor and his development review team has done an outstanding job pulling together this presentation. But I also want to take a point of executive privilege to give some additional kudos to Mr. Andrew Barnes, who has been working and leading us through all of the details as it relates to the water infrastructure related process. And so he's done a great job. And I think as a part of the great job that we've done, and also last week being open and honest with our developer friends about where we were, I think they came to a reasonable conclusion as well, that we are being open and honest with them, that we're endeavoring to work with them moving forward. But we also want to be able to come back to you at a later date to really talk about one of the things that Mr. Tabor highlighted in his last point, was just to talk about water, sewer, infrastructure impact issues moving forward. With that being said, sir, I will, Mr. Tabor and staff will entertain any questions you all may have.
All right, and at this time, this proposal was pulled. So let's, just for the sake of time, I know we have several Planning Commission members who are on the lunch break, so I want to be mindful of their time. So being that this has been pulled, we'll revisit it at a later date, and we'd like to head to your next item you have, Mr. Tabor.
Thank you very much. So Garrett, do you have the second presentation document? Chesapeake Bay ordinance?
Yes, sir. Coming up now.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can everyone see the next slide?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So this is a proposed text amendment to the city code, and it is related to properties citywide, and specifically the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Next slide, please. So a little background on the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It spans more than 64,000 square miles, encompasses parts of 6 states, Delaware, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia, and the entire District of Columbia. More than 18 million people live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Next slide, please. The land to water ratio of the Chesapeake Bay is 14:1, the largest of any coastal water body in the world. Our actions on land have such a big impact on the bay's health. Next slide, please. So several rivers, the Susquehanna, the Potomac, the Rappahannock, the York, and James rivers, and of course our own Appomattox River, are part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and those others are the largest rivers that are part of the watershed. More than 100,000 streams, creeks, and rivers, called tributaries, tread through this watershed. Each watershed resident lives within a few miles of one of these local waterways, which acts like pipelines to connect our communities to the bay. Next slide, please. Each of the streams, creeks, and rivers in the Bay watershed has its own watershed called a subwatershed, small watersheds, or local watershed. Each waterway and watershed contributes to the Bay. Next slide, please. So this illustrates point sources of pollutants, if you will, phosphorus and nitrogen within the watershed in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And next slide, please. This shows where Petersburg is located within that watershed. Next slide, please. So this shows phosphorus locally delivered to the Chesapeake Bay. And we can see that Petersburg is on the southern edge of the watershed. Next slide, please. This shows that Petersburg is within the 75 to 100% quartile ranking of phosphorus sources. Next slide, please. So nitrogen is also locally delivered to the Chesapeake Bay, and we can see Petersburg located again at the southern edge. And the next slide, please. And this shows urban nitrogen sources, and Petersburg, again, is within the 75 to 100% quartile ranking. Next slide, please. So the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, or Bay Act, was enacted by the Virginia General Assembly in 1988 as a critical element of Virginia's non-point pollution source management program. The purpose of the Bay Act program is to protect and improve water quality in the Chesapeake Bay by requiring the implementation of effective land use management practices. Next slide, please. The City of Petersburg Municipal Code currently includes required elements and criteria that local governments must adopt and implement in administering Chesapeake Bay Act programs. There is a need to amend the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act sections, required elements and criteria of the municipal code to comply with act requirements and to remain compliant with state and federal laws. This is a request to approve an amendment to the City of Petersburg Municipal Code Chesapeake Bay Preservation Areas section. The proposed amendments to the municipal code are defined in attachment A of the document that was included in the agenda packet. And that concludes the report.
All right, Ms. Lyons, you want to chime in on anything else you want to add to this?
No, it looks fine. Mr. Tabor, what action are you requesting from the group here, sir, as a part of your presentation?
So there was an ordinance included in the packet, and we would request that the ordinance be considered for approval, and I believe a public hearing may also be required.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so.
Yes, it'll
so
require 2 readings and a public hearing.
All right. So this is first reading, Ms. Williams?
This
Yes,
is
sir.
second.
This
It
should
was
be,
advertised as on the prior agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
All right, so this is the second reading where we can open up the floor then for public comment. This is on the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, which was enacted by the Virginia General Assembly in 1988. And the act of the program is to protect and improve water quality in Chesapeake Bay by requiring the implementation of effective land use management practices. And at this time, if anyone would like to speak during the public hearing, you can raise your hand in the Zoom and you will be recognized. The floor is open for public comment. Garrett, see any hands?
No, sir.
Give it another few seconds just in case. All right, Garrett, still no hands?
No, sir.
All right, this public hearing is closed. Next, we'll take questions or comments from members of council. Starting off, any questions from members of council? Councilwoman Wilson Smith?
Oh, I have no questions.
Okay. So at this time, then, if there are no questions, I will accept the motion to adopt the ordinance amending the municipal code regarding the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act.
So move.
Second.
All right, we have a second from Councilman Myers, a motion from Councilwoman Vice Mayor Smith Lee. At this time, any discussion? If not, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cuthbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Myers,
Aye.
Councilmember Hart. Is he on?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Hill. Is Councilmember Hill gone? I don't see him. Vice Mayor Smith Lee. Aye. Mayor Perrin.
Aye.
Motion's passed.
All right, Mr. Tabor, you have any other items for the commission?
Well, actually, as a joint public hearing, could we also get a vote for the planning commission regarding that item?
Yes, we can.
Great. And is Secretary Murals available?
I am, but we need to unmute Marie Vargo, Fat Tommy, and Jim Norman.
Okay, Bill Irvin is also on the line, I believe.
He is, but he's unmuted.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Who was the third one in that request? I caught the first two.
Tommy.
Got that one?
And
I'm
Jim
unmuted.
Norman.
Jim Norman is still muted.
Okay. Commissioner Taylor.
Do we have to, first, do we have to have a motion in planning commission first?
Oh,
Yes, I will.
Yes, please.
Who would like to make the motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner
Second.
Bland. Sorry, who was the second?
Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. All right, Secretary Murals, call it out.
Commissioner Taylor. I believe she's unmuted. Do we know if she's unmuted? Andy Taylor?
We can come back to her.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah,
Commissioner Vargo?
Aye.
Chair Alexander?
Aye.
Commissioner Hairston?
Aye.
Commissioner Norman?
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards?
Aye.
And Commissioner Taylor?
I think she may have left the call. I don't see her on here.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't see her on here either. She was there.
okay. Well, that's 6-0.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Mayor, this is Councilman Hill. I got kicked off right quick, so I vote in the affirmative. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Tabor, you have any other items?
That concludes the items, the joint public hearings with the Planning Commission.
Okay. All right, I know I want to thank the Planning Commission for serving and for all the work you do and helping us. I know, just be respectful of your time. I want to get your items done for those that have to return to work. And we will go back to item 2, which is discussion and consideration. Item A, a request to authorize the Economic Development Authority to allow South Central Wastewater Authority to conduct due diligence, surveying, boring, and archaeological investigation on the Roper property 119, 130 Pocahontas Street for proposed ROW alignment extension. Mr. Lyons?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Jeremy Tennant has been doing an excellent job working with the EDA as well as the community. So if Mr. Tennant, Garrett, if we could allow Mr. Tennant in briefly in this process, we have done a number of things and he has done an excellent job. So I give him an opportunity to speak if he's available. Mr. Tennant, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm available. And may I also extend the microphone to be turned on to Mr. Robert Wilson as well, please? Mr. Wilson will actually be the one providing the presentation for this particular item today.
Mr. Robert Wilson is the Executive Director of our South Central.
Exactly.
Wilson.
Mr. Tennant, which one is this? The presentation or the truck route?
This would be the presentation. The PowerPoint presentation, I'm sorry. Mr. Voorhees?
Are you ready, gentlemen?
A little bit more time, so there we are. Now we're ready. The PowerPoint presentation is up. It's all you, Mr. Wilson.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Lyons. He got us in touch with the appropriate city representatives to get through this process. Also like to thank Councilman Cuthbert and Mr. Tennant. They helped me notify all the residents on the island, and they attended all the public information meetings with me. I first came in front of the City Council October 20th of last year. That's when we gave you an update on the nutrient project. Just to hit the high points on that real quick, we're improving the nutrients at the wastewater plant. That total construction cost is around $107.7 million. We're working with the DEQ and the state. Right now, we're trying to negotiate a grant of $75 million. So that means the local share, or what we split between the 5 jurisdictions, is approximately $32 to $35 million. For the city of Petersburg, I want to make sure we reinforce in the current rate that you pay, we have the debt service and the operating costs built in. Just so you'll know, your operating cost is around $3.7 million, and your annual debt service to be included as part of the nutrient project, which we think the local share will be, is 1.3. And we already have that built into the local rate. All right, so what we're talking about today, as part of this project, we want to put a new road or access to the plant. So if I can go to the next slide, please. This was the original, this was just our concept that we put out to go from the end of Pocahontas Street and Logan Street, traverse through the old Roper property, then come up in parallel right 95, the limited access, and tie back into Magazine Road. And this basically goes through the basketball courts. All right, next slide, please. We had some, through the information we got from the public information meetings, and that when we talked to the EDA, we wanted to change the alignment a little bit to try to maximize the opportunity to develop 2 parcels. And that's why you see us taking down that one warehouse as we go across from left to right, and then again paralleling Route 95. One of the other ideas that came out, since we're taking out the basketball courts, could we possibly trade that for playground equipment, a pavilion, or some other appurtenances for the island? We don't have a problem either way. It's just what's in the best interest of all the stakeholders, which is the city of Petersburg and the island residents. So whichever they'd like to do. Also, when we come off of Bridge Street, there's some crepe myrtles there. They're in pretty rough shape. So we would go ahead and replace those. Next slide, please. We also talked to FOLAR, which is the Friends of the Lower Appomattox River, and how this could tie into their trail system. They sent us this sketch, and on the east side of the road, they suggested a joint use for a walking trail and a bike trail. And again, next slide, please. This is what we showed as a typical section. We had sidewalks on both sides and 2 bike lanes. If the city, FOLAR, and the residents find it more acceptable to have the joint use path which be on the right-hand side of the screen, we'd certainly leave the sidewalk on the left, take out both bike lanes, and put the joint use path in. Next slide, please. This slide is one of the residents who was unable to attend the meetings brought this to our attention afterwards, showing that there's a possible additional right-of-way through that property. And he wanted to show us that for consideration. He also indicated there might be some archaeological issues that we need to address in here. So if we get access, what we plan to do is do the surveying. We've got to do some vertical boring for bearing of what the soil will do for the road. And we're also bringing in an archaeological group. We use Dovetail out of Charlottesville, and we'd like that resident to work with us to make sure that we cover everything. Our suggestion is using one of the other alignments, because the orange alignment here might not allow you to get the total beneficial use of that property. And let's see. We went before the EDA on March 4th, and I think that says that in your package. By resolution, they approved access contingent on getting access from City Council. There's an agreement there between both entities, so both entities need to agree on that. And hence, that's why I'm in front of you this morning. But we would like to get some boots on the ground, do some surveying, do some boring, do the archaeological investigation so that we can develop a plan that we can have a formal submittal to continue the right-of-way acquisition process. And thank you for your time, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Wilson, can you highlight for the mayor and city council, as we are talking about the road design and the preparation work, when do you envision this process to start? And how do you anticipate, by taking down one of those buildings, what do you anticipate using part of the liquor site for, if I remember correctly, as a part of the lay down dock? Can you speak to the time frame and your planned use of some of this?
Yes, sir. We are on schedule to advertise this project in January of 22. And by the time we get through the bid process, we would be beginning the project in the late spring, early summer of 22. We would hope that we'd come in here first, cut the construction road in to get all the traffic, or as much of the traffic, off the island as we can. Right now, it's currently at about 78 trips a day, and of that 78, 20 are either combination tractor trailers for hauling biosolids, chemicals, or supplies to the site, and the other part of that is your septic tank haulers also. But we'd want to put this road in first. It would probably be put in as a gravel road for construction. We hope that there'd be the opportunity, maybe the contractor could lease a portion of this site. So that would be a revenue stream for a laydown yard. And then we would not do the final paving or anything till the end of the project. And our intent is this would be a public road.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes, sir.
this is Charlie Cuthbert. I'm sorry, but my camera's not working, so I can't be recognized, and I hate to just interrupt, but I would like you to go back over what you said about the Orange Road. It looks like that's going to impact the saleability of any riverfront property and make the Roper Brothers property less saleable if we went along the Orange Road there that veers to the south of Pocahontas Street. Would you address that for me, please?
Yes, sir. When we looked at the alignment that we have, and I think it's the one we're recommending is back on page 14 of your board package, but the orange line, we'd have to elevate the road because part of that's in the floodplain. And if you built behind it, you'd be looking at the road. So if we build from the end of Pocahontas Street to Logan Street, come over and run parallel to 95, that still gives you the ability to build on the canal side if in the future there's an opportunity to make the canal improvements. But you could elevate those structures. So in the event there was a catastrophic flood, they'd still be built above the 100-year floodplain, and it'd be an inconvenience. You wouldn't be able to park there during the flood, but you wouldn't ruin your structures, and you still have the viability to walk down along the canal, and maybe if that changes the zoning for that area.
Well, would you show us again, please, the preferred route, your preferred route, Mr. Wilson?
All right. Garrett, could we go back, I think it's 2 slides? One more? This one right here would be, this is the suggested alignment where we take out that one warehouse that's falling down, and then on the south side of the road, which is the bottom side of the page, if all entities would like the joint use with the walking path and bike path, we put that on the south side and then the side between 95 and the road. And go ahead.
So what we see in front of us is the route that you think is the optimum route. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That allows you to maintain the large warehouse up there that has the dock facilities and so forth, and then still have the ability to develop along the canal. That's how we saw it, as 2 parcels. You could either market one now or market both, or however that's most beneficial for the EDA in the city.
All right. And at what point are you going to, or at what point is someone going to decide what is the route to be constructed?
Well, when we get boots on the ground, we actually have to go in there, survey, get the scale drawings, and then my understanding would be make another presentation to the ADA and city council to proceed. So we're doing our due diligence, but we still have to come back to both entities to see if they accept their alignment and approval.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Councilman Cuthbert. Next, Mr. Lyons.
Mr. Cuthbert, the one thing of it is when you go back to the orange highlighted area, Mr. Wilson and I had the good fortune of engaging Mr. Stewart from Pocahontas. And he was the one who suggested that we consider the orange alignment. And Mr. Wilson and others are considering it, but we are still focused, sir, on the earlier recommendations that he just spoke to you about. But we wanted to be all inclusive to make sure that we take into everyone's concern. But right now, our alignment, as Mr. Wilson is talking about, our recommendation as we see it today, will be the one that Mr. Wilson just spoke to. But we want to be all inclusive, all involved in this process.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lyons. And And I agree with Mr. Wilson's proposal there for the taking the road and taking out that warehouse that needs to come down, and it still gives us the ability to market that property. That orange line would definitely kill any potential development along that waterfront corridor there. My question though for Mr. Wilson is can you include the trail with your proposal number one, and is there any of a chance for you to have that trail paved along the same time as the road, just because trails are really important to every community? I mean, it makes it more marketable and it's an added attraction. And I thank you for including that in there. So, Mr. Wilson, is it possible to have that paved along with the street at the time?
Yes, sir. We would agree on. I think when I came to the EDA the first time, I thought it would be like a rock dust or a gravel. But in talking with Miss Austin from Folar, she said they'd like to be paved. We'd be happy to do that. The other thing with Mr. Stewart, well, he's got some local knowledge, and we'd definitely like to include him through the process, especially when we do the archaeological investigation. If he knows anything on that parcel that we need to pay particular attention to, we want to make sure we pick that up, because our findings have to go to the Department of Historic Resources to make sure we cover everything.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of council?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Vice Mayor Smith-Lee.
So my concern was, you all did get the feelings and from the residents of the Pocahontas Island. Was Mr. Stewart in, because he's the mayor of Pocahontas Island, was he in with your meetings?
Madam Vice Mayor, yes. So two things of it is big thank you to Mr. Cuthbert for walking door to door, along with Mr. Tennant, as well as getting flyers out, as well as talking to folks individually in this process. There were several outreach efforts made to Mr. Stewart, unsuccessful, but to double back what we had promised the EDA, Mr. Tennant and I, as we went over and personally, I called Mr. Stewart and he personally took us on a tour. We heard his concerns. Secondly, as we went back to the EDA, Mr. Stewart had some technological problems, so I brought him here to City Hall so that he could be a part of the Zoom meeting. The orange alignment that we're speaking to was an item that he brought up as a part of the EDA. Chairman Root and his group and others have gone to the site on a number of occasions, and in some instances, there may have been a member or two of the community that have joined them there. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Rue, Mr. Packer, and others have been out there. I think their main concern is not just the road, but as we move forward with our next phase of development for what we choose to do with the Roper site, that we are continually sensitive to the needs and more specifically some of the environmental concerns as it relates to the island, which is what Mr. Wilson talked about. Those 39 trips, which is 78 trips. Mr. Wilson and his group has joined Mr. Stewart and others in trying to address areas that it's hard for me to, because I don't have a pointer. There's a location where right up by the northeast corner, west corner of the property coming into Roper site, that a lot of trucks were sitting there idling and others, and Mr. Wilson has doubled down with his contractors to address that issue. And as a part of the process, we're going to address some additional concerns for the community. So big thank you to Mr. Wilson, Mr. Tennant, and Mr. Cuthbert for engaging the entire community in this process, and Mr. Stewart was involved in this process.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question I would like to ask. So you saying that the debt is 1.3 and the operating cost is 3.7, so that's a total of 5 million that the city would be responsible for. Is that correct?
So ma'am, if you were to go back, and Mr. Wilson, if you were to go back, what he's talking about is the overall project. The overall project, which is the nutrient credits and the upgrades to our South Central Waste Facility. If you see the sign on the chart where you see 95, you see the paving, and then you see where it looks like it heads out a little bit north. But if you were to take that white line under 95, you're going back to South Central, where the our wastewater facility there. That requires $107 million worth of upgrade. Mr. Wilson has indicated that we have asked the state for a certain amount of dollars and cents. I think we anticipate about 75 million. That means 35 million will be broken down between the 5-member jurisdictions, which is Dinwiddie, Chesterfield, Prince George, Petersburg, and
Colonial Heights.
And Colonial Heights. Of that piece, the 5 million that you're talking about, it is already included in what we pay as a part of our debt service right now. So there would be no need for a rate increase. So we join the force with those groups because there are issues that we have to address there. So from a $5 million perspective, that is not an issue at this time because we are already paying it as a part of our ongoing debt service on the project.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Those are all my questions.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from members of council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this
All right,
Councilman
Hill.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I guess my view is somewhat the same as yours, Mr. Mayor. As long as we don't run anything that will prohibit any future development, I think it's a great project. I thank everyone for working on it thus far. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for partnering with us along with Councilman Coupler. I'm pretty sure with the residents over at Pocahontas Island, I'm pretty sure that they are engaged as well. And that's a great tourist attraction for us. So if we can get that trail there, that would even make the stock in that area go up. So I think it's a great project. Prayerfully, we can get it done. But I'm more leaning towards the one that would help us get future development in the area. So I have no questions. I'm just excited about it, and prayerfully we can get it done. Thank you, Mr. Lyons, and you and your team as well.
Mr. Mayor, one last thing. I want everybody to know that we are, and we will be coming back to you. We started the initial conversation last week with the EDA. We are getting a lot of interest for that Roper site property, and we are considering everything that Mr. Hill, that you just raised, and Mr. Mayor, as we try to develop that out. We've gotten some offers, some proposals, and one of the things that we do not want to do is to negatively impact what we are able to do with that. So we are all being sensitive to that, and we will be back to you at a later date to talk to you about proposals that would either go to the EDA and or head its way for the council for review and final approval.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, Councilman Cupberth, I know you have a motion you're ready to make.
Yes, let me make two other comments, though, if I may. I want to thank Mr. Wilson for the way he has handled this, Mr. Robert Wilson. It's been a pleasure working with him. I could not have asked for more in terms of cooperation or willingness to cooperate. Everything that he did was top notch in this presentation, including encouraging the participation and of the residents of Pocahontas. I personally walked the streets of Pocahontas handing out flyers that Mr. Tennant was good enough to print for me, and they were delivered to every structure on the property, including Mr. Richard Stewart's house. And we did have 3 public information sessions in the historic Pocahontas Chapel in order to answer any questions that the public might have and to receive the input from the public. This is going to make a huge, huge improvement in the quality of life of the residents of Pocahontas that really now are tormented, you might say, I don't think that's too strong a term, by the 18-wheelers that come through their neighborhood day after day after day. So this is just a blessing for the Pocahontas community, and I am strongly supportive of it. Getting to the motion, let me ask the mayor for guidance as to what specific action council is to take at this point.
Okay, at this time, Councilman Cudbriff, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the EDA to grant South Central Waste Water Authority to conduct preliminary due diligence on the Roper property for the proposed ROW extension through the property to connect Pocahontas Street to Magazine Road.
I move that we approve the resolution just described by the mayor.
All right.
Second.
All right, we have a second from Councilman Hill, and at this time it's a resolution. So we'll open up the floor for public comment on the resolution. If there's anyone who wants to speak, you can raise your hand in the Zoom and you will be recognized to speak. And this is on the South Central Wastewater Authority due diligence surveying on the Roper property for the ROW extension through the property. All right, Gary, do you see any hands? Yes, we have one.
Yes.
Miss Andretta McCray.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I think the project is really good. I think it will bring in some peace and quiet to the residents who have been having to endure that noise for such a very long time. I do have a question as to when everything starts to take place. If everything goes as planned, will that help to possibly bring some type of employment to the city? I know you'll probably need like construction workers, things of that nature. Possibly to see that if those things are needed, if some of the residents, the community people of Petersburg, could possibly benefit from that.
Okay, Ms. McCray, could you give me again your name and address, please, just for the record?
That was my only question.
Okay, Ms. McCray, can I have your address for the record? Okay. All right, Mr. Lyons.
Mr. Wilson, is there anything that you can speak to about that, sir, in terms of what you anticipate for construction as it relates to job or anything of that nature? Any insight, sir?
We have not looked at any as formal numbers as far as employment or anything, but a project of this size is going to bring in a lot of local subcontractors, and they'll hire part of their workforce on site.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no other hands in the Zoom. At this time, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
I think Ms. McCray has her hand raised.
Okay.
I guess her address.
Oh,
right.
I have one more question. I apologize.
Ms. McCray, yes, could you give us your name and address again for the record?
I apologize.
Okay.
Andretta Whitfield, 32.
Could you repeat that again for me, please?
My other question was, I didn't say that we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I think it would be a good idea, and I don't know, but to have something where it is actually written that if we abide by the rules and regulations that we have to, that we get something out of it during the process. So if employment is something that could happen, where the contractors who come in, where they have to, if available or if they can, hire a percentage of the community if they're available. And I know that, not just because it's out there that everyone will be like, hey, I want to work, but to have that available and to have it written down so it's not just, well, yes, of course they'll come and hire, but What if they don't?
All right, Miss McCray, give me your address again.
532 South Street.
532 South Street. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other hands for this public comment on the resolution. At this time, we'll go back to, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cuthbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Myers,
Aye.
Councilmember Hart, I think is still absent. Councilmember Hill,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Smith Lee,
Aye.
Mayor Pern.
Aye.
Motion's passed.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Wilson. And we look forward to the project.
I appreciate y'all's time and consideration. Thank you.
All right. Next, we'll move on to item 3A, which is a public hearing for the appropriation for the $2 million grant from the Virginia Economic Development Partnership Authority for the Project 2 project. Mr. Tennant?
Yes, sir. Per the conversation we had last week regarding the performance agreement between the city and the state's Department of VEDP, Virginia Economic Development Partnership Authority, this is in essence that grant through the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund to utilize the $2 million to actually utilize for the upgrades for the utility infrastructure along Normandy Road. Staff recommends approval of the appropriation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is a public hearing, and this is for the purpose is to consideration the appropriation of the $2 million grant from the Virginia Economic Development Partnership Authority for the Project 2 project. I'll open up the public hearing now. All right, we have Mrs. Barbara Rudolph.
Good afternoon, City Council. I think it seems like a no-brainer to me to approve the $2 million. The thing that I would ask you to do, not as part of this meeting, of course, but in the future, it would be really helpful to have a presentation about how all the pieces and parts fit together. Not only the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund, but also some of the things that were talked about just a few minutes ago about I think that Mr. Tabor talked about relative to what's going on with the pharmaceutical developments, the 17 million and the 13 million and where the money is coming from. I mean, it would be nice to have a roadmap for the whole thing. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, along those lines, sir, to address Ms. Rudolph's questions, Mr. Tennant didn't go through the detailed presentation here, but all of this information, as well as everything about AMPAC, as well as articles, are also being placed on our city website. So it's available for everybody for us to be as transparent and as open as we possibly can with everything. So we will double down to make sure all of that information is there for Ms. Rudolph and Ms. Citizen to be able to access.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lyons.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Gary, see any other hands?
No, sir.
All right. All right. Well, this public hearing is now closed. Next, we'll go on to any questions or comments from members of council. Let's start with Councilman Hill.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the proposed item.
All right, and that's the approval of the $2 million grant from the Virginia Economic Development Partnership Authority for Project 2.
A second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions from members of council? All right, seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cuthbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Myers, Councilmember Myers. Okay, he's absent. Councilmember Hill,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Smith Lee,
Aye.
Mayor Pern.
Aye.
Motion's passed.
Okay, thank you. Next, we move on to our next item, which is item 3C, a public hearing and consideration of ordinance amending the text of the city's zoning ordinance regarding restaurants and other uses. Mr. Tabor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there are currently more than 80 restaurants located in the city of Petersburg. The city's zoning ordinance currently does not, however, contain a definition for or otherwise regulate restaurants as a land use. There is a need to further define restaurants and related uses to clarify zoning matters related to restaurants. The Planning Commission adopted a resolution during their meeting on February 17, 2021, recommending approval of the text amendment. This is a request to adopt the ordinance amending the text amendment of the city's zoning ordinance regarding restaurants and other uses contained in your packet. And would like to especially thank the city attorney for his assistance with drafting the proposed language, and the ordinance.
Okay, and this is the public hearing for the consideration of the ordinance amending the text of the city's zoning ordinance regarding restaurants and other uses. The floor is open for the public hearing on this item. Yeah, you see any hands?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Seeing no hands, this public hearing is now closed. Any discussion, comments from members of council? If not, Councilman Cuthbert.
I move that council adopt the ordinance amending the text of the city's zoning ordinance regarding restaurants and other uses as proposed.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Next, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cuthbert.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Myers.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Smith-Lee.
Aye.
Mayor Pern.
Aye.
Motion's passed.
All right, next we'll move on to item 3E, which is a public hearing and consideration of an ordinance authorizing the city manager to approve the reduction of site plan review and land disturbance permit fees when offset by in-kind staffing augmentation in an amount not to exceed 30% of the total fees. And this is brought by Mr. Tabor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council referred a proposal to the Planning Commission for a recommendation regarding an ordinance authorizing the city manager to approve the reduction of site plan review and land disturbance permit fees when offset by in-kind staffing augmentation in an amount not to exceed 30% of the total fees. The City of Petersburg receives site plan applications and land disturbance permits for development projects throughout the City of Petersburg. The city has received offers to augment city staffing to expedite the review and approval process. The augmented staffing would be provided by the property developer at their expense. The augmented staffing would be provided in lieu of additional staffing that would be reflected in a reduction in fees and would reflect the reduction in city staff resources necessary for the review and approval processes. The reduction fees would not exceed 30% of the total fees. We have also provided in the staff report the reduction amounts. Currently, $800 is the fee for site plan approval, and the reduction would be $560. So the developer would still pay $560. Then for land disturbance permits, the current fee is $250, and that would be reduced to $175 if the augmentation occurs and the 30% reduction is approved. The Planning Commission considered the item during their February 17th, 2021 meeting and voted to recommend approval. A resolution is attached for your consideration.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, and others, in an abbreviated sense, having outside help, expertise, and others allows us to get development plans in and back out of the door without us having to go and hire additional staff and be bogged down, because it helps us tremendously with this.
Okay, thank you. This is the public hearing now. We're about to open the floor for consideration of the ordinance to approve the reduction of site plan review and land disturbance permit fees when offset by in-kind staffing augmentation amount not to exceed 30% of the total fees. Start off with Ms. Barbara Rudolph.
Good afternoon, Barb Rudolph, 1675 Mount Vernon Street. I think the concept of an offset is fine. My question would be, this is like the actual developers providing staffing in order to the city, so that the city will not have to hire temporary help or contract with someone to do the additional work. My concern is the folks who were brought in by the developer. I don't know what kind of work is being done. Maybe it's so standard and routine that it could be given to anyone to do and it wouldn't change the outcome. It just seems like a little bit of subjectivity, if it's possible, to be introduced by the developer, who of course has a certain desired outcome, whereas if it's performed by government or by somebody contracted by the government, it's supposed to be looked at entirely objectively, you know, from the standpoint of many different competing interests. And I think the developer kind of has a single interest, which is doing the project. So I would just encourage the city to consider that, because if you do have developers providing staffing to do things and then something ends up, you know, not coming out the way we want, then we've let them in the door through this particular legislation. Thank you.
Ms. Rudolph, Mr. Mayor, to answer that question, is the firms that they're bringing in, these are professional firms that have their stamp of approval. And secondly, and even more importantly, ma'am, is that even though they submit this to us, Mr. Tabor and his team, as a part of their development review team, still go through the process of evaluating that in that piece. Your comment is very much appropriate, but I want to assure you that we are still doing our internal review. It's just all of the design work and the stamp plans and others that come from others allows us to move the process along faster, but we are still doing our due diligence with our team to review those things.
All right, thank you. All right,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is the public hearing still on?
Yeah, the public hearing is still on. We have another speaker. And then I get to questions and comments from members of the council. Okay. Next, we'll go to Ms. Norma Williams.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Members of council and those that are in attendance via online virtual Zoom. Norma Williams, Array Business and Technology. In regard to developers, contractors, I just have a question. Do we require any work, any contracts that are given, that these contractors only hire U.S. citizens? There are no immigrants that are doing the work, or I shouldn't say immigrants. I apologize for that, not to offend anyone, but undocumented individuals doing the work. They must be U.S. citizens on these contracts or doing the work. And that also chimes into the question that the young lady McCray asked about Pocahontas. When we're talking about jobs, will we ensure that there are no undocumented individuals on those contracts? Is there any oversight to ensure that these contractors, any clause put in those contracts to ensure only U.S. citizens get the jobs? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other hands. right, next we'll close the public hearing. Next we'll go to comments from members of council. Councilman Cuthbert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have severe reservations about this proposal. I think it's not a good idea, and I intend to vote against it. I think we are relying too much on the developers' representations, or excuse me. I think if we adopt this proposal, I think we will be relying too much on the developers' representations without careful scrutiny and challenge to whether those representations are accurate or well-founded. I am not prepared to rely upon our Department of Planning to exert that oversight. The Department of Planning has not done the level of investigation that I would have expected from a Department of Planning when it comes to presenting a list of the city's disposable properties to council for council's review. I use that just as an example of the Department of Planning not questioning, not going out and looking at what's there to be seen. On that list of disposable properties are ravines, creeks, creek beds, and yet the Department of Planning presented that list to council and said, you know, put these on the for sale list. If we can't even look at our own property to see whether it's anything we want to sell or not, or whether it's in the community's best interest to sell it, how can we possibly expect the Department of Planning to challenge the representations that a developer might make? So I think we're setting ourselves up for some disappointment. I think we need more checks and balances on developers' representations, and I think this resolution weakens those checks and balances. So I think this is not wise. I really wonder where on earth did this idea come from anyway? Can staff tell us that, Mr. Lyons? Whose idea was this? Where did it come from?
So as we have been working our way through the AMPAC process, we've been working with our group. They actually, in terms of moving this one along, Councilman and Mayor and Council, they had asked for some reduction in this process, their fees, because of what they were doing to help us and bring in other design folk to help us move this project along. One of the things that going back to your initial question, sir, is this. One, this is to set up a process. This would be the first time that we are doing this, and that's why we brought it to you. Secondly, we wanted to set up a standard for moving forward. Thirdly, with the process that we are talking about using, you will be assured that we will not employ this process with anyone without bringing it back to you all to clearly understand. And this is not something that's designed to just run rampant. The last piece of it is, Mr. Cuthbert, I'll go back to your other observation about the ravines and others. As I share with you, staff on an economic development side, not your planning side, economic development side, poured together the list of those city-owned and outstanding properties. I've assured you, Mayor, and others that we are bringing that list back to you to clean that list up. In addition to that, there is a proposal that is being brought back to you all for your first work study session in May, that based on our review by our water folk, that has helped us to go back and look at those projects that you're talking about that are in the ravine. So we are working through that process to clean that up. But going back to this initial piece here, this started with the AMPAC piece. The second thing of it is, we brought it to you in terms of transparency. Thirdly, keep in mind that we will only be employing this if we bring it back to you for your approval to do such, and we will do this in the operation of transparency, if that helps.
Do you know of any other localities that have such an ordinance?
Well, I don't at this point in time, in this whole piece, because I haven't looked at it in some, this was,
It gave you your favorite kind.
but this was intact for us. And Mr. Tabor and others, when we are dealing with Impact, Civica and Flow, we meet every week with their design team and engineering firm called JLL and others. And there are a litany of individuals in this process, including their design team. They have deadlines and others that in order for us all to meet, including the development review team here, we recognize, quite frankly, if we don't come up with some other magnitude for us to look at these as options, there is not enough resources in terms of our planning and development team to move all of these things along. And so we looked at this as a caveat because it was brought to us by JLL. But we can also employ and explore whether or not there are other municipalities doing that.
I cannot imagine just look at what you just said, Mr. Lyons. We don't have the resources to question what the developer presents. Therefore, we're going to accept what the developer presents. And that's not a good recipe for a successful municipality. If we don't have the resources, then we need to hire the resources. But there's got to be some checks and balances brought to bear. We cannot just say, oh, Mr. Developer, this has an architect's seal on it or a professional engineer's seal on it. We're going to accept it. We need another set of eyes examining this stuff.
The other set of eyes, sir, in all due respect, everything they submit to us still goes to Mr. Tabor and our development review team. All of our technical folks still review those documents. They are not just submitting it to us and employing it in the field. Our utilities folk, our design folk, our building folk, they all get a chance to review this as a part of the design review process.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Cuthbert, I'd like to add to Mr. Cuthbert's, but I think what Mr. Cuthbert is trying to say is that there's not enough of you and Reggie that goes around to meet the needs and the requirements of what these people are expecting from the city of Petersburg. And so they're asking for additional assistance. So as Mr. Cuthbert has said, why is it that we don't have the resources to provide additional, I guess, staffing in order to meet those guidelines or the requirements they're asking for? Is that, Mr. Cuthbert, what you're thinking about?
Absolutely, Councilman Myers. Thank you for adding the weight of your observations to what I was saying. If the project is so big that we do not have the manpower to vet it carefully, then we need to hire an independent contractor to vet the proposal for us. We cannot just accept what the developer submits to us and then give him 30% credit because we don't have the expertise to question what he's doing. I mean, none of that makes sense, not to me. So I think we need to do a couple of things. I think we need to turn this resolution down, and I think we need to hire at whatever expense reasonably has to be incurred in order to protect the municipality, our city, our citizens, to make sure that we're not just accepting the word of the developer or the proposal of the developer or the details of the development proposal. We've got to be very careful. We're blessed that we have this opportunity of projects of this scale. We've never had this before, at least not in my recollection, but it behooves us when we had this opportunity to vet the presentation of the developer carefully to make sure that there are no problems that are going to come back to haunt us 5 and 10 years from now.
Could I provide?
Mr. Mayor,
Hold up, we have
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Wilson Smith and Councilman Hill.
Okay.
What is the total amount of revenue that the city received in the past 2 years from this type of collection of the fees as they are? And how much do we project we would not get if we did this?
I don't have the answer to that, but we'll work with Mr. Tabor and our finance folk to figure out what we have and get that information to you, ma'am.
I think that's crucial information, because we're talking about a reduction in fees, but we don't even know how much we have obtained with these fees. And then we don't know what the reduction would look like, or if the city can afford that. All that's crucial in making this decision. I can't support it, and I truly think and would like to make a motion that we table it until we have all the answers that we need.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we have a motion by Councilwoman Wilson Smith.
I second that. That motion to table until we get further.
Mr. Mayor, may I, before you move forward?
Real quick, we have a motion a second. Let's go with Councilman Hill, because he had a comment, and we'll go to Councilman Myers.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like, and I'm pretty sure all of us want, the impact situation to be successful. And if we do it for one, we have to do it for all. And, right now our city is at a point where a lot of people are looking at us, and we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. And I'm pretty sure I've never heard of anything like this before. I mean, this is new in the 5 years that I've been on council, for us to do something of this magnitude. And, I don't know if a special use permit will be warranted in a situation like this, but I mean, we need to try to get as much capital as we can off of businesses that come to the city, whether they're, AMPAC or whomever. So with that being said, it's hard for me to support that. I understand, maybe the concept somewhat, but in the situation in which we just come from, as far as our finances and things like that, I can't see us giving away funds like that or of that magnitude, because we're going to get them to check their own work, and they're going to come back to us and let us know that they did what they say they did, and then something else down the line may come up. And I know we do have small staff, and our staff they work hard. This is no dig on economic development or on the planning commission or any of the team or you, Mr. Lyons. But at this point, it'll be hard for me to support that. And maybe if we table this and come back and work it out to where it's, it'd be more understandable for us. Maybe we could, but at this time, I can't support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Councilman Myers.
Mr. Mayor, I understand everything that Mr. Cuthbert has mentioned and early in this conversation, but I need to ask Mr. Lyons, and if this is specific legislation that you're asking the council to support, then you all need to put something before us if it only impacts AMPAC. And where other council members seem to think that we have to broaden everybody because we individualize somebody, that is not necessarily true. And so if this is specific for AMPAC, and you all present something to us that would be specific for AMPAC, in order for the city to be on a level playing field, because we don't have the staff equal, and that you all can hire temporary staff to level the playing field there, then I think specifically you all need to provide us that kind of information so the council can make a sound decision. So I would agree to table it unless there is a dire emergency at this particular point for us to make a certain decision. But you all need to have someone there to provide the municipal services that is needed, or employees that are needed to provide the municipality that level playing field that we need to move forward. That's why I'm, Mr. Mayor, but specifically, if this is for just AMPAC, then you all need to start submitting your request to say that these are for these particular individuals, and the impact that it may have with respect to other developers coming forward, because each developer is not going to be specific to what it is you're doing for AMPAC.
Right, and I just want to chime in on that proposal, because we want to be mindful too. I know the AMPAC site, the whole purpose is to expedite the review process, so they won't end up on somebody's pile, on somebody's desk in City Hall, in which they have these time constraints that they have to meet in construction of facility and getting their production up and running. So if we need to specify that to make it clear that this deal does not get botched because of lack of resources, I'm not sure if we're gonna have the time to even build out, being that we're in the crunch time of them meeting their development plan.
Mr. Mayor, could I add something?
Can I say one thing before I come to you? Mr. Mayor, back to Mr. Cuthbert's question, and I want to make it plain, as you know, for 8 years, I ran a development operation in another city. Mr. Cuthbert asked a question, are there other cities doing this? Other cities use what we are talking about here, and I didn't answer the question correctly, use what you call third-party people to do inspections for you. It is a commonly used process to help you get through a process. I ran the Phoenix operation during the height and the proliferation of 2007, and when the housing boom happened. These kind of projects were coming in so fast that if you didn't consider some of these kind of things, the only way that you end up doing is you just add a lot of staff, and then when you have a downturn, because I was in a cost recovery operation, so it is more commonly used than I spoke to initially, so I wanted to make that clear. And Mr. Tabor, I know you wanted to share something, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I wanted to clarify that this is related to the site plan review process and the land disturbance permit process. The site plan review process is an interdepartmental process that requires a review by the planning department, by public works, by the police department, by additional departments, and sign off of site plans before a development can move forward. This does not change that process at all. The city departments would always and still have to review those site plans and sign off on those site plans. The intent of this issue before you is to attempt to expedite that process. And it came up indeed due to the AMPAC and pharmaceutical manufacturing development process, where they have contracted with IBTS, a third-party plan reviewer, to review plans. In this process currently, IBTS reviews the plans. They submit those reviewed plans to the city. We, across departments, as we would any other development, review those site plans and have to approve those site plans and sign off on those site plans as we would in any other development. This proposal is to consider offsetting what the developer would pay for example, to IBTS with a 30% reduction in the site plan application fee. When, in this case, the pharmaceutical development developers are using IBTS, that is expediting the review process, because when the plans come to the city, they don't have many of the changes that the city would require them to make. Those corrections would already have been made, and then they're submitted to the city, so it reduces the time of going back and forth with changes that are required by the developer in that site plan review process. And then also in the land disturbance review process as well. So it's just to expedite that process. It does not change the process because we still, as a city, as departments, have to review the site plans and sign off on them.
All right, and at this time, Mr. Williams, can you come in?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would just say I think that council is wise to consider tabling this. And looking at the package, all I see is a resolution from the Planning Commission recommending that council adopt an ordinance. There's no ordinance in the package, so I don't know what exactly they're asking you to adopt. There should be an ordinance. The answer that Mr. Lyons and Mr. Tabor gave is accurate, that some localities do take advantage of this and do have an ordinance to waive fees. But there's no ordinance in the package. It's just a resolution from the Planning Commission recommending that council adopt an ordinance. So I think I would recommend that you proceed to table it and let them bring you that ordinance and show you exactly what it is you're adopting.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, we have a motion and a second to table it. At this time, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Before we go there, because I second the motion, but Mr. Lyons and Mr. Tabor, is there something pressing right now that with this project that needs that you all can get this back to us, that it may hold up the project or whatever? I mean, is there something right now that we need to act as a council?
No, sir, there's nothing pressing,
Okay.
but we will endeavor to work with Mr. Williams and get what we have brought to you back to you as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes. Question, Councilman Cupper.
in response to Councilman Hill's concern,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
the only issue that's being proposed here is whether fees should be reduced.
Mhm.
It's not whether the process should be elongated or shortened or expedited or held up. I think none of us wants to stand in the way of the site plan review process going forward, or the land disturbance presentation going forward. But the sole focus of this ordinance, which the city attorney says we don't have, is whether we should reduce fees or not. It has nothing to do with timing. So I don't see, even if we had the ordinance in front of us, I don't see how timing would be implicated in any way. That is the time that it takes for a site plan review to take place. But in any event, I call for the question.
All right. And at this time, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cuthbert,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Myers,
Aye.
Councilmember Hart, I'm sorry, he's absent. Councilmember Hill,
Aye.
and Mayor Pern.
Aye.
Motion is passed to table.
All right. Thank you. Next, we move to item 3F, which is a public hearing and consideration of an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a lease agreement with the Appomattox Regional Governor's School for city-owned property located at 1555 Flank Road. And this is Mr. Tabor and Miss Boone, please. Can you unmute?
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I thought is Ms. Boone, you still here? I thought we had asked to move this to a later date, if it's not changed, because they had come back. Mr. Tabor, if I'm wrong, jump in. They had come back, they were not meeting again until April, and they had a change of leadership. And they had asked us if we could move it to a later date. But Mr. Tabor or Ms. Boone, if I'm incorrect, please correct me.
That is correct. We would ask that we be able to bring this back in May.
Okay.
we sent a memo out for several items that we want to bring back to you and make. We have been working with them, progress has been made, but in order to make sure that we're all dealing with the same facts and they can give us more clarity moving forward with their change of leadership. We think that offers the best option for us moving forward, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, we'll move on then to item G, which is a public hearing and consideration of an ordinance amending the text of the city's code of ordinance to establish a technology zone at the former Southside Regional Medical Center site.
Mr. Tennant will take the lead on that presentation.
Yes, sir. Honorable Mayor, Council, citizens. During the December 8th, 2020 City Council public hearing, Council requested that staff extend the I-95 technology zone to the former Southside Regional Medical Center site. Upon perusal, staff recommends not expanding the existing I-95 technology zone, currently zone M1 Light Industrial District at this time, as the potential uses allowed within the I-95 technology zone are not currently compatible under the current RB Office Apartment Regulation Districts. Staff recommends a study be conducted on the site to ensure that a PUD that allows a specific use that can be placed on the site to allow a compliant use that fits within the character of the neighborhood that will also be available for VEDP incentives as as requested. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Again, this is the public hearing on the consideration of the ordinance amending the city code for establishing a technology zone at the former Southside Regional Medical Center site. If anyone would like to speak now in the public hearing, please raise your hand in the Zoom and you will be acknowledged. Garrett, any hands so far?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, seeing no hands, this public hearing is closed. Next, we have discussion from members of council.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Hill.
Yes, staff, they want us to deny, was that the?
Staff recommends not expanding the existing technology zone at this time.
I move that we not expand the zoning ordinance or the district zone at this time.
Second.
All right, there's a motion, there's a second, a discussion from members of council. Councilman Myers, question?
Can you ask, what would this expansion provide if we were not to deny it?
Mr. Tennant?
So basically, the existing incentives are that for machinery and tools tax. Unfortunately, as per the state interpretation of machinery and tools, is only benefited towards manufacturing. That particular site, it currently is RB, which is office area, if you will. So it does not allow for manufacturing as is currently zoned. So there would have to be an upzone there for this particular request in order for any type of M&T tax credits to be issued, similar to the impact facility. Because this facility does not have that, there's no incentives to answer that in a long roundabout way.
Okay, thank you. I understand perfectly. Thank you.
Mayor Perm, I have a question for clarification.
All right.
Councilmember Hill made a motion to not expand it. So is that approving the staff recommendation to not expand it? So,
yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? All right, if not at this time, we have a motion to second. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cuthbert.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson Smith.
You have to leave for the
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Myers.
Aye.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Mayor Perm.
Aye.
Motion's passed.
All right. That is all of our public hearings for today. I would just like to say before we adjourn that we had great news on our bond rate being increased to triple B positive, which is a huge accomplishment. Being in the pandemic and being able to get a rating increase was just remarkable. I'd like to thank all of city staff for their contributions to helping us getting there. It was a deep dive because I know Standard & Poor was not looking at doing any rate increases for any localities, but they did see the progress that was being made in Petersburg. And I thank all of you all for your hard work. So at this time, I move on to item 4, which is adjournment. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. We have a motion. Councilman Hill is gone.
Second, I'm gone.
We have a second.
Gone.
Councilman Hill, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.